The void swallowed the stars, leaving nothing but an oppressive silence. They sent me to the Sharon, a deep space hauler that had simply vanished from the comms. I expected dead systems, a vacuum leak. What I found was silence thicker than the void itself, a cold dread seeping into my bones, and the unsettling certainty that something else was breathing in the dark, hungry for the light I carried. My name is Kalen Vance, and my life was a symphony of circuits and diagnostics. Maintenance technician, problem solver. When a vessel went dark, I was the one they sent to coax life back into its cold, dead systems. The Sharon was a behemoth, a deep space hauler built for hauling raw or through the abyssal regions, a leviathan of steel designed to swallow light and sound. When she vanished from the comms, a ghost in the black, command called me. Routine diagnostic, Vance. Probably just a comms array failure. Standard protocol. Standard. Routine. Lies. All of it. My salvage tug, the Moth, was a tiny, buzzing insect compared to the Sharon. I docked her to the hauler's main airlock with a soft thud that resonated through the dead hull. The void outside was absolute black, a terrifying, starless expanse that seemed to press in on the ship, eager to reclaim it. The comms remained silent, swallowed by the abyssal region's interference or something worse. The airlock hissed open, filling my suit's helmet with the smell of recycled air, faintly metallic, tinged with ozone and something else I couldn't quite place. Stale, like a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. My heavy boot met the cold, grated floor of the Karen's main corridor. My footsteps echoed, too loud, too sharp, in the profound silence. Ambient sound, a faint, distant hum, almost subliminal, of the ship's dormant systems, punctuated by the occasional drip of condensation, echoing strangely. Sharon, this is Kalen Vance. Maintenance. Respond. I transmitted, my voice flat in my helmet. Only static greeted me, warped by the void's interference. Comms are dead. As expected, I muttered to myself, trying to sound nonchalant, trying to convince myself. But a cold dread had already begun to seep into my bones, a premonition that whispered of something far more sinister than a simple system failure. The ship was eerily quiet, a labyrinth of interconnected modules, labs, and vast, dark cargo bays. Emergency lights, powered by auxiliary cells, flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe with a life of their own. Dust motes danced in the sparse illumination, illuminated by the beam of my helmet lamp. There were signs of a sudden, unexplained abandonment. A data pad left open in a deserted lab, its screen displaying a complex, unfinished equation. A coffee mug, still half full, in the primary control room, but no one there. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just gone. It was like a snapshot of a moment frozen in time, a tableau of sudden, inexplicable absence. My unease intensified, coiling in my gut. Abandoned. Not evacuated. There's a difference. And this feels like a prelude. The silence here was not the silence of a powered-down ship. It was the silence of held breath. A predator's silence. Or something waiting. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the innate fear of a lone man in an impossibly vast, dark place. The Sharon felt less like a derelict and more like a sleeping beast. I began my diagnostic sweep, starting with the primary power conduits, located deep in the engineering section. The ship felt vast, sprawling, each corridor seeming to stretch into an unsettling infinity. The air grew colder, denser, the emergency lights flickering with a more frantic rhythm. Every creak of the aging metal, every distant clatter of something shifting in the darkness, made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs, too loud in the oppressive quiet. Ambient sound, a sudden, sharp clang of metal, as if a heavy chain fell in a distant cargo bay, followed by dead silence. Then a faint, high-pitched whine. Hello? Anyone there? I transmitted, my voice a little too sharp, a desperate attempt to break the suffocating silence. Only warp static answered. My internal monologue, usually so logical, fought against a rising tide of irrational fear. Just the ship settling. Old tech. The crew probably just abandoned ship, left in a hurry. But they left the coffee warm. No one leaves a warm coffee. And the silence, it was too profound, too absolute. As I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the anomalies became more frequent, more unsettling. Lights would flicker erratically in my path, then stabilize just as I reached them. Doors would slide open a fraction, revealing only darkness, then hiss shut as I approached. Faint, ethereal whispers seemed to drift from empty rooms, just at the edge of my hearing, too indistinct to make out, too pervasive to ignore. Was it the ship's ventilation system? Or something else, something trying to communicate? Ambient sound, a low, almost subliminal thrum, too deep to be the ship's systems, resonating in my bones, a feeling of pressure in my inner ear. My comms, already unreliable, became distorted. My voice, when I transmitted, came back garbled, twisted, sometimes with strange, elongated echoes that didn't sound like me at all. Sharon. Sharon. Kalen. Kalen. It was chilling. Just atmospheric interference, I muttered to myself, my voice tight. A desperate attempt at self-reassurance. Dead space. Happens. But doubt, insidious and cold, began to creep into my mind, chilling me more than the low ship temperature. It was a doubt that spoke of something unseen, something malevolent, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. I finally reached the engineering section. The air here was colder, denser, the emergency lights flickering with a more frantic rhythm. The main power conduit was dark, dead. I plugged in my diagnostic tablet, its screen bathing the cold metal in a stark blue light. Ambient sound, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound from inside the wall near my head, like something dragging claws on metal. My fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, running diagnostics. The system was dead, not a simple malfunction. It had been systematically purged. The data wiped clean. Too clean. Like a wound cauterized, leaving no trace. Someone did this, I whispered, my voice raw, the words barely audible over the sudden, violent thumping of my heart. They didn't just leave. They were erased. The chilling implication settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't an accident. It was an act. Then, a sound. Clearer this time. A faint, almost imperceptible click. Directly behind me. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched. I spun, my plasma cutter already in my hand, its targeting laser a trembling red dot in the gloom. Nothing. Only the shadows. But the temperature in the module had dropped precipitously. A cold so profound it burned, settling around me like a shroud. Ambient sound, a low, guttural gurgle, like liquid moving through a constricted pipe, directly behind me, quickly fading into a wet, sucking sound. My eyes darted around, searching, straining against the gloom. My paranoia, usually a controlled tool for survival, began to fray at the edges, spiraling into a desperate, internal scream. It's here. It's real. It's unseen. The hairs on my arms stood on end, a primal warning. A faint, chilling whisper resonated inside my mind, bypassing my ears, bypassing my comms, speaking directly to my consciousness. You, here, US? My plasma cutter clattered to the floor, my hand trembling uncontrollably. This was impossible. Telepathy? Or some advanced form of neural manipulation? My sanity, already on the brink, threatened to shatter. The vastness of the void, the cold indifference of dead space, suddenly felt less terrifying than the unseen presence that now filled the ship. Who? What are you? I projected, my mental voice a desperate plea, a raw, terrified question into the overwhelming silence. The whisper resonated again, colder, more pervasive, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. We aren't here. Always. It was a promise. A threat. A chilling certainty. It wasn't just physical pursuit. It was psychological warfare. They were in my head. They were the environment. They were the shadows. The silence, the cold. And I was utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare where the enemy didn't just hide. It was the very fabric of my reality, and it was toying with me, savoring my fear. The descent into terror had truly begun. The whisper, cold and alien, burrowed deep into my mind, a persistent echo that twisted my thoughts, distorted my perceptions. You are alone. It hissed, elongated, chilling. The words were not spoken, but felt, resonating in my very bones, a direct assault on my sanity. My internal monologue, a desperate attempt to cling to logic, was a frantic scream against the encroaching madness. No, not alone. Just isolated. This is a trick. A hallucination. Stay calm. Focus on the mechanics. Find the problem. Fix it. Escape. But the Sharon itself seemed to conspire against me. Lights flickered with a deliberate rhythm, creating dancing shadows that mimicked impossible movements. Doors would slide open just enough to reveal a glimpse of darkness, then hiss shut before I could process what I'd seen. The temperature would drop suddenly, plummeting to freezing, then surge to oppressive heat, a constant assault on my physical and mental state, pushing me closer to delirium. Ambient sound, the distant, distorted wail of a siren, abruptly cut short, replaced by static that seemed to pulse with a malevolent rhythm. My comms, a desperate lifeline, became a torment. I tried to hail command, tried to send a distress signal. All I got was static, then warped echoes of my own voice, twisted into monstrous, inhuman tones. Sometimes, a chilling parody of a familiar voice. My sisters. My old captains. Words of encouragement, distorted into mockery. Words of fear, amplified into despair. Hello, Kaylin, a voice, impossibly gentle, impossibly hers, whispered in my comm, are you scared? I ripped the comms unit from my suit, my hand shaking violently. It was a trick. A horrifying, insidious trick. They were playing with my memories, exploiting my fears. My profound isolation, once a fact, was now a weapon, wielded by an unseen hand. The entity's influence became more direct, more personal. I would round a corner, and for a fleeting moment, see a figure in the dim light, a crewmate from the Karen's manifest, their face pale, eyes wide with silent terror, their body subtly twisted, elongated, a grotesque parody of human form. Then, they would vanish, dissolving into the shadows, leaving behind only the cold dread of their ghostly presence and the faint, lingering scent of decay. Ambient sound, a faint, scuttling sound, like something chittenish dragging across metal, from directly above me, then the wet, squelching sound of something moving through a vent. I huddled in a maintenance tunnel, a cramped, claustrophobic space, trying to think, trying to formulate a plan. My primary goal was now simple: reach the bridge. The escape pods were there. My ship, the Moth, was docked to the main airlock, but I couldn't risk going back that way. The entity knew my approach. I needed to bypass the comms array, override the airlock protocols, and escape this living nightmare. But the entity seemed to anticipate my every move. Pathways I tried to take were suddenly blocked by inexplicable energy fields, or sections of the ship would suddenly power down, plunging me into absolute darkness, forcing me to backtrack through winding, unfamiliar corridors. The Sharon itself felt like a sentient trap, its very structure working against me, its dark, silent bulk a conscious predator. The whispers intensified, a cacophony of alien voices, a silent chorus of malevolent amusement that echoed inside my head. They weren't just words, they were sensations. Cold, pressure, the feeling of being watched from every shadow, every vent, every crevice. I could feel their presence, a cold, unseen breath on my neck, even when nothing was there. My sanity began to fray. I questioned everything. Was that flicker of light real? Or an illusion? Was that distant clatter a fallen object? Or the creature moving, subtly, silently? Was the cold touch on my skin the ship's failing environmental systems, or the unseen presence brushing past me? The lines between reality and illusion had blurred, dissolving into an indistinguishable nightmare. I started talking to myself, my voice, raw and hoarse, the only sound that wasn't a distorted echo or a chilling whisper. It's just a malfunction, Kaylin. Just a trick of the mind. You're isolated. That's all. But the words sounded hollow, pathetic, even to my own ears. I was arguing with myself, with the ship, with the unseen horror that permeated every inch of this derelict. Ambient sound, a low, resonant thrumming, vibrating through the metal deck plates beneath my feet, gradually increasing in intensity like a giant, unseen heart. I found evidence of the previous team. Not just a data pad, but a crew quarters, ransacked, personal items strewn across the floor. A family photo, its frame bent, lying face down. And on the wall, scrawled in what looked like dried blood, a single, horrifying word: Join US. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just disappeared. They had been driven mad, assimilated, consumed, and then used. My fear, already profound, escalated into a terrifying, all-consuming despair. This wasn't just a physical threat. It was an assault on my mind, on my very perception of reality. The enemy didn't just hide. It was the environment, or even a part of my own mind. And the most terrifying aspect was the loss of control over reality, the terrifying realization of being utterly alone against an unseen nightmare. My desperation reached new heights. I had to escape, before I lost myself entirely. Before I became just another whisper in the echoing silence of the Sharon. The Sharon was no longer just a ship. It was a living, breathing nightmare, its vast, dark industrial zones and claustrophobic corridors a conscious entity hunting me. The whispers, once subtle, now formed a relentless, deafening chorus in my mind, alien voices twisting my thoughts, mocking my every move, amplifying my terror. You are ours. They hissed, elongated, chilling, resonating in my very bones, a direct assault on my unraveling sanity. My internal monologue, a desperate, fractured scream, clung to the last vestiges of logic. No, not real. Just my mind breaking. Just the isolation. Fight it, Kalen. Fight. But the ship continued its torment, a sentient trap, mocking my every attempt at escape. Corridors would twist into impossible geometries, leading me back to where I started. Doors would seal shut just as I reached them, only to hiss open behind me, revealing empty darkness. The flickering emergency lights intensified, creating a strobe-like effect that disoriented my vision, turning every shadow into a lurking threat, every piece of machinery into a grotesque, silent observer. Ambient sound, a sudden, sharp intake of breath, incredibly close, but no visible source. My own terrified gasp, amplified by my helmet. I was constantly on the run, my body aching, raw, fueled by pure adrenaline and the desperate need to reach the bridge. The escape pods were there. My suit's power cells were dangerously low. My plasma cutter, now completely useless after attempting to blast through a reinforced bulkhead, lay discarded, a useless weight. I was unarmed, helpless. The entity's psychological warfare escalated. I would hear my own name whispered from an empty vent, followed by the faint, distinctive jingle of my grandmother's antique music box. A memory I hadn't thought of in years, meticulously recreated, twisted into a chilling mockery. Then, the scent of fresh-baked bread, a comforting aroma from my childhood, would briefly fill a dark, moldering corridor, only to be replaced by the metallic tang of ozone, decay, and something else, something wet and sickly sweet. My sanity was fraying. I started seeing things. Not just fleeting shadows, but solid forms in my peripheral vision. Grotesque, shifting figures, their bodies elongated, their limbs twisted, their faces distended into silent screams. They were the crew. The Karen's crew. Mutated. Assimilated. They would melt into the walls, dissolve into the shadows, leaving behind only the cold dread of their ghostly presence. I would whip my head around, heart hammering, only to find empty space. Was it real? Or was I finally losing my mind? The lines between reality and illusion had blurred into an indistinguishable nightmare. Ambient sound, a low, rhythmic scratching, like nails on glass, slowly approaching from around a blind corner, overlaid with a wet, squelching sound. I resorted to desperate measures. I tried to overload the ship's power grid, hoping to disrupt the entity, to force it into the open. I manually rerouted conduits, bypassed safeties, pouring raw energy into the system. The lights flared, then died, plunging entire sections of the Sharon into absolute darkness. But the whispers intensified, a silent, mocking laughter echoing in the sudden black. My efforts were futile. The ship itself felt like an extension of the entity, a vast, complex organism designed to trap and torment me. The profound isolation was suffocating. I spoke to myself constantly, my voice hoarse, desperate, my only companion in the echoing silence. It's not real, Kalen. Don't listen. Don't see. But every word felt like a lie. I was arguing with a ghost, with a nightmare that had no face, no form, only a pervasive, malevolent will. I found myself in the main research lab, a vast, circular chamber, filled with the ghostly silhouettes of scientific equipment. This was where the previous team conducted their experiments. This was where they vanished. The air was colder here, laden with a sense of lingering dread and the sickly sweet smell of biological residue. On a central console, a final log entry, glowing faintly. The anomaly. It's not external. It's a consciousness. It's inside the ship. It's eating us. Not flesh. Minds. It wants to join. The entry ended abruptly, a deep scratch mark gouged into the screen, as if the last researcher had tried to tear it from the console. And then, I felt it. A presence. Not a whisper this time. Not a vibration. A cold, immense pressure surrounding me, pressing in on all sides, like a physical weight. It was vast. Formless. Everywhere. The emergency lights in the lab, which had been flickering erratically, suddenly stabilized, glowing with a stark, cold brilliance. And reflected in the polished surfaces of the lab equipment, in the shimmering display screens, I saw it. Not a monster, not a physical form, but a distortion, a ripple in the air, a shifting pattern of light and shadow that seemed to stretch into impossible dimensions, filling the entire lab. It was the entity. Vast, shapeless, pervasive. It was the environment. It was the ship. And reflected within that shimmering distortion, 1,000 faces. The Karen's crew, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies subtly twisted, elongated, their mouths open in silent, guttural screams. My sister, her face contorted in a silent scream. My old captain, his jaw slack, eyes staring blankly. All trapped, all assimilated, all part of the entity's vast, horrific consciousness. The whispers swelled, a silent, deafening roar in my mind. We are all of them. And soon you too. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, ready to burst. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp. The terror was absolute, overwhelming, stripping away all pretense, all sanity. This was the climax, the final confrontation. And the entity was not just physical. It was intellectual. It was existential. It was the absolute, terrifying loss of control over reality. I was cornered, trapped, surrounded by a being that was both nothing and everything. My attempts to escape or fight back had been futile. And now, I faced the horrifying realization that I was utterly alone against an unseen nightmare that sought to consume not just my body, but my very essence. My descent into hell was complete. The most terrifying aspect was not what it could do to me, but what it could make me, what it could take from me without a single sound. And the profound isolation was the only comfort left. I saw the main power conduit, thick as my torso, snaking across the lab floor, pulsating with a dangerous, unstable energy. It led directly to the ship's reactor core. A desperate, suicidal gamble. If I could overload it, if I could force a catastrophic meltdown, it would destroy the Sharon. It would destroy me, but it would also destroy it. Or at least drive it out. A final, desperate act of defiance against the ultimate assimilation. The entity's whispers became a seductive purr, flowing through my thoughts, showing me visions of peace. Not the harsh, chaotic reality of my life, but a serene, tranquil existence. My fears, my losses, my loneliness, all dissolved. My sister's face, smiling healthy. My old captain, commending my work. Perfect, idealized memories, offered as a temptation to surrender, to merge into their blissful, terrifying unity. Surrender. Kalen. The whisper coaxed, gentle as a lover's touch, yet utterly chilling in its intent. Become one with us. No more pain. Only peace. But the image of the 1,000 tortured faces in the distortion, their silent screams echoing in my fragmented mind, solidified my resolve. This was not peace. This was oblivion. This was the ultimate loss of self. With a guttural cry, raw and animalistic, I lunged towards the power conduit. My body, ravaged by exhaustion and psychological torment, screamed in protest, but my will was unyielding. The entity reacted, its formless presence solidifying, pushing back, a crushing weight that threatened to pin me to the floor. The whispers intensified to a deafening shriek, a cacophony of alien voices that tried to tear my mind apart. My hands, trembling, clawed at the conduit's access panel, my fingers raw, bleeding against the cold metal. The entity fought back, distorting my vision, filling my mind with searing pain, making the conduit shimmer and writhe like a living serpent. Stop, futile. The whispers raged, laced with something akin to fury, or perhaps simply a logical assessment of my disruptive defiance. But I pushed through, driven by a primal need to exist. I tore open the access panel, revealing the raw, humming power lines within. The air crackled with immense energy. I felt the heat, the radiation searing my skin. My last act, a desperate, final choice. With a scream that tore my throat, I plunged my hands into the humming, raw power lines. The pain was immediate, absolute, searing through every nerve ending, burning out my cybernetics, consuming my flesh. My body convulsed, my muscles seizing, as the raw energy coursed through me, a living conduit of pure, uncontained chaos. The entity shrieked, a silent, deafening cry that resonated in my mind, vibrating through the ship itself. The shimmering distortion that was its form convulsed, flickering, tearing apart. The thousand faces screamed, then dissolved, vanishing into nothingness. The atmosphere in the lab filled with a cold, desperate roar, as if the very air was being ripped apart. The last thing I saw, before blinding white light consumed everything, was the entity's distortion, tearing, shrinking, attempting to recoil from the immense, uncontained energy. It was fleeing, or being destroyed. Then, oblivion. A profound, silent blackness. The resolution was deeply ambiguous and disturbing. I had triggered a catastrophic overload. The Sharon would be no more, reduced to a cloud of superheated plasma and shattered debris. And I, Kalen Vance, maintenance technician, would be with it. My physical body, annihilated. But the horror lingered. The whispers of the entity. They had spoken inside my mind. They had played with my memories. They had tried to assimilate me. What if it wasn't confined to the ship? What if, in that desperate, final act of connection, it had succeeded, not in full assimilation, but in leaving a piece of itself within me? A lingering echo? A silent infection? Perhaps, as the Sharon exploded, a fragment of its consciousness, a sliver of its pervasive being, had imprinted itself onto my dissolving mind, carried away on the very wave of energy I had unleashed. My escape from Ethel 9 was not a clear victory. It was a terrifying uncertainty. Did I escape? Or did I become a new vessel, carrying the unseen nightmare within me, doomed to a life of escalating paranoia, questioning every shadow, every sound, every whisper in my own mind? The horror was in the lasting psychological impact, the profound scarring of my psyche, leaving the audience with an unsettling question about what was truly real. The final, chilling realization that the enemy might not just be out there, but forever within me, the ultimate loss of control over reality. And the profound isolation was my eternal torment.